Hello everyone, welcome back to Agri Farming. Today we are back with how to prune your garden plants. Although the task of trimming beautiful foliage is sometimes hard for gardeners to follow, regular pruning keeps most plants healthy and encourage new growth. What is pruning? Pruning is horticultural and silvicultural practice involving the selective removal of certain parts of a plant such as branches, buds, or roots. The practice entails targeted removal of disease, damaged, dead, or non-productive structurally unsound or otherwise unwanted tissue from crop and landscape plants. But when and what to prune depends on the type of plant and the climate you live in. For instance, flowering and fruiting plants prefer to be cut back in late winter or early spring to spur a hardy crop. Trees and shrubs that bloom in the spring start setting new buds as soon as the old flowers have fallen. So, it's crucial to prune before those new buds come in. And many other plants need continual trimming to remain vigorous. Now, let's get into when to prune trees and plants. Figuring out when to prune your plants can be confusing, but luckily, pruning at the wrong time is rarely fatal. Off-cycle pruning might result in fewer flowers or fruit, but it usually won't harm the plant in the long run. However, avoid pruning too late in growing season. Doing so will encourage tender new growth that will die in winter weather. Most fruit trees and berry plants need to be pruned while they are dormant. Failure to do so will result in plant steady decline as it will send out suckers that direct energy away from fruiting branches. The exception to this rule is spring flowering trees and shrubs. This needs to be pruned soon after their flowers fade in plant late spring and early summer. Furthermore, most perennial plants need to be cut back entirely either before or after their growing season, and they require regular pruning and deheading all season long. So, the next topic is what you will need. That is equipment or tools. For pruning, you will be needing gardening gloves, protective clothing, hand pruners, loopers, shears, and handsaw. And the materials you will need are overgrown and mature plant. Now, let's get into the instructions on how to prune your trees. For pruning fruit trees, if you are growing a tree for its fruit, make pruning a high priority. Heading cuts or cutting the ends of branches concentrate each branch energy and encourage it to produce more fruit the following season. Thinning cuts or removing entire limbs allow you to take out unruly suckers and dead or diseased limbs. The first thing you need to do is inspect your tree. In the late winter or early spring, inspect your tree to see where it needs pruning. Take note of any branches that have grown over 2 feet. They will be unlikely to bear fruit again. The second thing you need to do is identify which branches to keep and remove. For this, decide which branches to keep and which to remove based on health, shape, growth pattern, and personal preferences. Sometimes it's helpful to mark branches for pruning with pieces of strings as you are observing the whole tree. The third thing is remove unwanted branches. Use loopers or handsaw to remove dead or diseased branches as well as any unnecessary new branches that might divert energy from the fruit-bearing ones. Branches growing downward should be the first one to go. The fourth step is make heading cuts. With your loopers, make heading cuts on all growth around the tree to shape it. Each cut will increase the number of lateral branches. Now, let's get into pruning berries. Raspberry and blackberry bushes in particular benefit from removing all the weak and broken canes to allow sunlight to reach more of the bush. Make sure to wear protective clothing when pruning berries as the thorns can be painful. For this, the first thing you need to do is remove unwanted canes. During October through March, remove any weak, dead or diseased canes with pruning shears. The second is thin the canes. Thin the remaining canes to 10 to 12 per bush by cutting unruly canes at their base. The third is trim the height. Trim the height of the entire bush so it's no more than 5 feet tall. Now, let's get into pruning flowering trees, shrubs, and vines. In general, you can prune flowering plants at any time. However, paying attention to when your plant blooms and pruning soon after will yield the showest floral display. For this, the first step is note plant bloom time. During the first growing season, know when your plant blooms. The second is remove unwanted branches. Once the blooms fade, use your shears or loopers to remove any dead, weak, or diseased branches. The third is remove suckers at the base of the tree or plant. These are unlikely to produce hardy blooms. The fourth is shape the plant. Using your shears, make heading cuts to shape the plant. Cut just beyond a healthy bud and angle the cut at 45 degrees. Now, let's get into pruning perennials. Perhaps the most labor-intensive plants to prune are non-woody perennials, but the task is pretty straightforward. Regular pruning and deadheading throughout the growing cycle can create a perfectly manicured perennial bed. The first thing you need to do is cut back on dead growth. In the fall or early spring, use your shears to cut back all dead growth to the ground. The second is start training your plant. As the plant grows, train it by cutting off or digging up parts that become unruly. Dug up perennial plants can be replanted or gifted to other gardeners. The third is pinch flowers below the bloom. During the growing season, regularly pinch or cut off spent flowers just below the bloom to maintain appearance. The fourth is trim growth. Trim vigorous, non-blooming growth with shears throughout the season. Now, let's get into working with evergreens. Many gardeners leave their evergreen trees alone, which is probably a good idea. Evergreen trees don't really need to prune, and doing so can stress or distort the tree. For this reason, choose a dwarf evergreen if you have limited space. That said, there are times when evergreen bushes need to be cut into a hedgerow or trimmed to branch out and become fuller. This requires mindful, minimal trimming during the height of the growth season. Now, let's see plant pruning tips. If you haven't been pruning your fruit-bearing bushes regularly, you might need to do some rejuvenation pruning to remove anything that's overgrown or dead. You can cut back the entire plant to 6 to 12 inches of growth, basically starting over, or you can prune gradually over time. Unlike other fruit trees, peach trees should not be pruned while dormant. This delicate tree can suffer dieback when pruned in the winter. Pruning a peach tree during dormancy can also result in a less cold, hardy tree moving forward. The popularity of hydrangea plants has spurred many different varieties, some of that bloom on both old and new wood. For this reason, traditional pruning techniques have become outdated for certain types. So, be sure to check the recommendations for your variety. How and when to prune perennial plant is something you learn as you acquire gardening experience. It's the type of knowledge that varies from region to region, and it's part of the pleasure of gardening. Successful pruning can be among the most satisfying of garden tasks because the result can be spectacular. Pruning done correctly yields abundant flowers, foliage, and fruit. Pruning done incorrectly results in damaged plants, disappointment, and failure. No wonder we fear the process. While pruning successfully may appear complicated and difficult, the fact is that it is no more complex than any other gardening activities that gardeners engage in regularly. It's all the learning the correct methods for each type and variety of plant. There are distinct differences, and the answer lies in all good gardeners already know. Know each and every one of your plants and what it needs to thrive. Along with quality soil, the right lighting and essential nutrients, good pruning is just another tool in gardener's tool shelf and one that has some easy basic steps to master. Hope you enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe to this channel and please ring the bell button to notify you whenever new video is uploaded. Thank you for watching.